The dust-laden wind carried the jeers and taunts across the main street of Willow Creek as Josephine Zander clutched her bundle of ragged cloth closer to her chest, her knuckles whitening with the effort to keep her composure. It was 1876 in the Arizona Territory, and mercy was as scarce as rainfall. "There she goes again. Rag lady with her precious trash," Elmer Davis, the shopkeeper's son, called out from the boardwalk. Josephine kept her eyes fixed on the dirt road ahead, pretending not to hear the mockery that had become her daily torment since arriving in this frontier town 3 months ago. Her faded calico dress hung loosely on her thin frame, and her auburn hair was tied back in a simple braid beneath a worn bonnet. At 22, she carried herself with a dignity that belied her circumstances. "What treasures you got in there today, Miss Zander?" "Some fancy garbage from behind the saloon." Another voice joined in, followed by raucous laughter. Josephine clutched the bundle tighter. These weren't just rags to her. Each piece of fabric carried a history, a memory, a purpose that no one in this town could understand. But she couldn't explain. Not to them, not to anyone. As she hurried past the general store, her path was suddenly blocked by Meredith Holloway and her friends, the self-appointed arbiters of Willow Creek society. "My goodness, Josephine," Meredith said with artificial sweetness, fanning herself dramatically. "Don't you think it's time you stopped collecting trash? A woman your age should be focused on finding a husband, not digging through refuse." "Please let me pass," Josephine said quietly, trying to step around the women. "What's in there anyway?" Meredith reached for the bundle. "Let's have a look at your precious. The lady asked you to let her pass." The deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension like a knife. Josephine turned to see a tall figure approaching, his spurs jingling with each purposeful step. The women parted instinctively, their expressions shifting from mockery to deference. Bradshaw Xavier stood before them, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. At 28, he was already a legend in these parts, a skilled rancher whose cattle operation north of town employed half the men in the county. His dark hair peeked out from beneath a well-worn Stetson, and his eyes, the color of a summer storm, fixed on Meredith with unmistakable disapproval. "Mr. Xavier," Meredith stammered, her cheeks flushing, "we were just having a bit of fun." "Is that what you call it?" His voice remained level, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath his words. He turned to Josephine, his expression softening. "Miss Zander, may I escort you to your destination?" Josephine hesitated. She didn't know this man beyond his reputation, and accepting his help might only fuel more gossip, but the alternative facing these vultures alone seemed worse. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said quietly. As they walked away, leaving Meredith and her friends in stunned silence, Josephine kept her eyes on the ground. "Don't let them trouble you," Bradshaw said after they'd gone a distance. "Small minds occupy themselves with small matters." "They don't understand," Josephine replied, surprised at her own openness with this stranger. "What don't they understand?" he asked. She glanced at her bundle, then back at him. "That not everything of value gleams in the sunlight." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "True words, Miss Zander," he gestured toward her bundle. "Those rags they mock, I suspect they mean something to you. They do." "Then they're royal to me," he said simply. "A person's treasures aren't for others to judge." Josephine looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. There was no mockery in his eyes, no judgment, just a genuine respect that she hadn't encountered since arriving in Willow Creek. "I live at the edge of town," she said. "You don't need to accompany me the whole way. I'd be honored to walk with you if you'll allow it." His voice was gentle but firm. "Besides, I've been meaning to introduce myself properly. Our paths haven't crossed much since you arrived." As they walked, Bradshaw kept a respectful distance, but his presence beside her was unmistakable. People on the street nodded to him with deference, their curious gazes shifting between him and Josephine. "You're causing quite a stir, Mr. Xavier," Josephine observed. "Walking with the town oddity." "Let them stir," he replied with a shrug. "And you're not an oddity, Miss Zander." You're just new. This town doesn't adapt quickly to newcomers unless they fit neatly into their expectations. They reached the small cabin at the edge of town that Josephine had been renting from the widow Peterson. It was modest but clean, with a small garden plot she had begun to cultivate. "This is where I leave you," Bradshaw said, tipping his hat. Unless, Josephine prompted when he didn't continue, "unless you'd tell me the story behind those rags." His eyes held genuine curiosity. "Only if you want to, of course." Josephine hesitated, then made a decision. "Would you like to come in for coffee, Mr. Xavier?" "It's not much, but I'd be delighted," he said, following her up the short path to her door. Inside, the cabin was simple but meticulously kept. A small table with 2 chairs sat near a window, and shelves lined one wall, filled with jars of preserved foods and a few cherished books. What caught Bradshaw's eye, however, was the corner where a small loom stood, surrounded by baskets of cloth strips in various colors and textures. As Josephine prepared coffee on the small stove, Bradshaw moved toward the loom where a half-finished rug displayed an intricate pattern of colors. "You're a weaver," he said, admiration evident in his voice. Josephine nodded, bringing 2 cups to the table. "My mother taught me." She learned from her mother, who brought the skill from Ireland during the famine. "And the rags?" She placed her bundle on the table and carefully unwrapped it, revealing strips of fabric of various colors and textures. "Every piece has a story. This blue was from a dress my mother wore to church on Sundays. This red was from my father's favorite kerchief, this white lace." Her voice caught. "My sister's christening gown." "Where is your family now?" Bradshaw asked softly. "Gone." The word hung in the air. "Fever took them last winter in Kansas. I'm the only one left." "So you carry them with you," he said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "These aren't rags at all." "They're all I have left," she confirmed. "I collect other fabrics too, anything that can be used. I sell the rugs I make to get by. Or I try to, not many buyers in Willow Creek so far." Bradshaw sipped his coffee, his eyes never leaving her face. "Why Willow Creek? Of all places to start anew. My mother's cousin lived here once. She spoke of it fondly. I had nowhere else to go." Josephine shrugged. "It seemed as good a place as any. And this cousin passed away before I arrived. The town wasn't exactly what I expected." Bradshaw nodded thoughtfully. "Towns like this can be hard on newcomers, especially those who do things differently." He gestured to her loom. "But what you create here, it's remarkable craftsmanship. Have you shown your work to anyone who would be interested?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "More than you might think," he replied. "My ranch house needs some warming up." "Would you consider making a rug for my parlor? I'd pay you fairly, of course." Josephine looked at him suspiciously. "I don't need charity, Mr. Xavier." "It's not charity when I'm getting something valuable in return," he countered. "I've seen rugs like these selling for top dollar in Denver." "Quality craftsmanship has value, Miss Zander." "Bradshaw," he added after a moment. "Please call me Bradshaw." "Only if you call me Josephine," she said, a small smile finally breaking through her reserve. "It's a deal, Josephine." That evening, after Bradshaw had gone with a promise to return the following week to discuss the rug design, Josephine sat at her loom and worked late into the night. For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, she felt a spark of hope not just for her business but for the possibility of being understood. True to his word, Bradshaw returned the following week, and the week after that. What began as discussions about rug designs evolved into conversations about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they harbored. Each visit, he brought her something fabrics from his travels, a book of poetry, fresh vegetables from his garden. "You don't need to bring me gifts every time," Josephine protested one afternoon as he arrived with a basket of apples. "They're not gifts," he insisted. "They're exchanges. You give me your time and company, which I value greatly." As autumn approached, Josephine's first rug for Bradshaw was complete, a magnificent piece with rich reds, blues, and golds that captured the spirit of the western landscape. When she delivered it to his ranch house, She was struck by the contrast between its grandeur and her humble cabin. The Xavier Ranch sprawled across several hundred acres, with the main house standing proudly on a gentle rise overlooking the valley. Built of solid timber and stone, it spoke of permanence and prosperity. Yet inside, despite its size and quality furnishings, it felt incomplete somehow. "It's beautiful," she said as he showed her through the main rooms. "It's empty," he corrected her. "A house needs more than walls and furniture to be a home." When they reached the parlor, Bradshaw cleared the center of the floor himself, refusing the help of his housekeeper, Mrs. Gunderson. Together, they unrolled Josephine's creation. "It's perfect," he breathed, stepping back to admire the rug. The colors seemed to bring the entire room to life, transforming it from a formal, austere space into something warm and inviting. "You've created something extraordinary, Josephine." "I'm glad you like it," she said, unable to hide her pride. "I don't like it, I love it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Your payment as agreed." When Josephine opened it later, she found twice the amount they had discussed. Attached was a note, the fair market value. No arguments. As word spread about the magnificent rug in Bradshaw Xavier's parlor, attitudes in town began to shift. Mrs. Gunderson, who had initially viewed Josephine with the same suspicion as the rest of the town, became her most vocal champion. "That girl can create beauty from nothing," she told anyone who would listen. "Mr. Xavier says her work rivals anything he's seen in San Francisco or New York." Gradually, orders began to come in, first from the banker's wife, then from the hotel owner who wanted rugs for his finest rooms. Josephine found herself busier than she had ever been, collecting fabrics from wherever she could find them, still carrying her bundles through town, but now with her head held high. The mockery didn't cease entirely. Meredith Holloway, in particular, seemed determined to undermine Josephine's growing reputation. "I heard she's bewitched him," Meredith whispered loudly to her friends one day as Josephine passed the millinery shop. "Poor Mr. Xavier, taken in by a rag collector with a pretty face." Josephine pretended not to hear, but the words stung. She and Bradshaw had grown close over the past months, but she was acutely aware of the social gulf between them. He was Willow Creek's most eligible bachelor, the owner of the largest ranch in the county. She was a penniless orphan who created rugs from discarded fabric. That evening, as she worked at her loom, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Bradshaw standing there, his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm sorry to call so late," he said. "But I needed to speak with you. Is everything all right?" she asked, inviting him in. "No," he said frankly. "Everything is not all right. I heard what Meredith said to you today." Josephine's cheeks flushed. "You shouldn't concern yourself with town gossip." "It concerns me when it hurts someone I care about." He paced the small room, agitation evident in every movement. "This town, they think they know everything about everyone, but they understand nothing." "Bradshaw," she said gently, "people will always talk. It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Josephine, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Her heart raced. "Of course." "Are you concerned about what people think, about you spending time with me?" The question surprised her. "Why would I be concerned?" "Because I'm not the easiest man to know. I have a reputation for being difficult, demanding." Josephine couldn't help but smile. "Is that what worries you, that I find you difficult?" "Among other things," he admitted. "Bradshaw Xavier," she said, stepping closer to him, "I've never cared what this town thinks of me, and I certainly don't care what they think of us spending time together. The only opinion that matters to me is yours." Relief washed over his features. "In that case." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I have something for you, and no, it's not payment or charity or anything else you might object to." Josephine took the box with trembling fingers and opened it to reveal a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a loom. "I had it made in Denver," he explained, "to honor your craft and to show you how much I admire what you do, how you've taken fragments of your past and woven them into a future." Tears sprang to her eyes. "It's beautiful." "Like you," he said simply. Then, gathering his courage, "Josephine, I find myself thinking about you constantly. When we're apart, I'm counting the hours until I can see you again. I've never felt this way about anyone." She looked up at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I don't know if you feel the same," he continued, "and I would understand if you didn't. Our circumstances are different, and Bradshaw," she interrupted, "do you think I care about your ranch or your standing in this town?" "No," he said after a moment. "That's not who you are. What I care about is the man who saw value in what others called trash, who said my rags were royal to him, who looks at me and sees not what I lack but what I create." He took her hands in his. "And what do you see when you look at me?" "I see a man who has built something impressive but stands alone within it, who has everything and nothing at the same time." She squeezed his hands. "I see someone I've grown to care for deeply, deeply enough to consider a future together," he asked, his voice hopeful. "Are you proposing, Mr. Xavier?" she asked, a teasing note entering her voice despite the gravity of the moment. "Not yet," he said with a small smile. "That requires a bit more planning, but I am declaring my intentions, Miss Zander. I intend to court you properly if you'll allow it." "I believe I would like that very much," she replied. The following Sunday, Josephine entered the church on Bradshaw's arm, wearing a new dress he had insisted on buying her for the occasion. The brooch gleamed at her collar, drawing admiring glances from the same people who had once mocked her. Meredith Holloway's face darkened with envy as they passed her pew. Her father, Judge Holloway, had been hoping for a match between his daughter and the wealthy rancher, and this public declaration of Bradshaw's interest in Josephine was a clear rejection of those hopes. "Everyone is staring," Josephine whispered as they took their seats. "Let them," Bradshaw replied, placing his hand over hers. "They'll get used to it." After the service, Reverend Thomas approached them in the churchyard. "Miss Zander, I wonder if I might speak with you about commissioning a rug for the altar. Mrs. Thomas has been admiring your work." "I would be honored, Reverend," Josephine replied, noting with some satisfaction the shocked expressions of those nearby who had been her most vocal critics. As they walked back to her cabin for Sunday dinner, Bradshaw couldn't help but chuckle. "You've conquered Willow Creek in less than a year. Impressive?" "Hardly conquered," she demurred. "They're just beginning to see the value in what I do, as I did from the start," he reminded her. "Yes," she agreed, smiling up at him. "You did." The courtship of Bradshaw Xavier and Josephine Zander became the talk of Willow Creek. He called on her regularly, taking her for rides across his property, picnicking by the creek, and introducing her to the operations of his ranch. For her part, Josephine thrived under his attention, her business growing as her confidence blossomed. She began teaching weaving to several women in town, including, surprisingly, Mrs. Gunderson, who proved to have a natural talent for the craft. Together they started a small cooperative, collecting unused fabrics from households around the county and turning them into beautiful, functional items. "You've created something important here," Bradshaw told her one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset. "You're preserving a traditional craft and providing income for women who had few options. It's satisfying," she admitted, "though I never expected to become a teacher. You're full of surprises, Josephine Zander." He took her hand, running his thumb over her calloused fingers. "Do you remember the day we met, what I said about your rags? That they were royal to you," she recalled with a smile. "I meant it then, but I understand it better now." His expression grew serious. "You take what others discard and find the value in it. You see possibility where others see only endings. It's not just about the rugs, it's how you view the world." Winter settled over Willow Creek, bringing with it heavy snows that isolated the town for days at a time. Bradshaw worried about Josephine in her small cabin, insisting on delivering firewood and supplies whenever the roads were passable. During one particularly fierce blizzard, he arrived at her door half frozen, having fought his way through drifts that reached his horse's chest in places. "You're a fool, Bradshaw Xavier," she scolded as she helped him remove his ice-encrusted coat. "You could have frozen to death." "I needed to make sure you were safe," he said through chattering teeth. She built up the fire and prepared hot coffee, wrapping him in one of her own handmade blankets. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, you know." "I know," he said, pulling her down beside him, "but I love you too much to stay away." It was the first time he had said the words aloud, though they had been implied in every action, every glance for months. Josephine's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "You love me," she whispered. "More than I thought possible," he confirmed. "I've known it for some time now. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. And you thought a blizzard was the right moment." She teased, trying to hide how deeply his words had affected her. "No time like the present," he grinned, pulling her closer. "Especially when the present involves being stranded with you." They spent the next 2 days together in her cabin as the storm raged outside. They talked about their pasts, his difficult relationship with his father, her memories of her family in Kansas. They played cards by lamplight and read to each other from her small collection of books, and they made plans. "My foreman's cabin is empty," Bradshaw said as they sipped coffee on the second morning. "It's closer to town than the main house, but still on ranch property. It would make an excellent workshop for your weaving cooperative. Are you offering us a place of business, Mr. Xavier?" Josephine asked. "I'm offering you whatever you need to pursue your passion," he replied, "and selfishly, I'd like you closer to me." When the roads finally cleared, Bradshaw reluctantly returned to his ranch, but not before extracting a promise from Josephine to visit as soon as she could safely travel. 3 days later, she made the journey to the Xavier Ranch, where Bradshaw showed her the foreman's cabin, a sturdy structure with large windows that flooded the interior with natural light, perfect for weaving. "It's wonderful," she breathed, already envisioning how the space could be arranged. "I'm glad you like it," he said, watching her with a tender expression. "There's something else I wanted to show you." He led her to the main house and up to a room on the second floor that she hadn't seen before. When he opened the door, she gasped. The room had been transformed into a studio, with a large loom by the window, shelves filled with yarns and fabrics, and a comfortable chair beside a small fireplace. "Bradshaw, what is this?" "This," he said, his voice soft with emotion, "is your room if you want it. My room." She repeated, confused. He took both her hands in his. "Josephine Zander, I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing up to those gossips in town, clutching your precious bundle of fabrics. I loved your dignity, your determination, your ability to see value where others saw nothing." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I said I needed to plan properly for this moment. I hope I've done it justice." Dropping to one knee, he opened the box to reveal a gold ring set with a modest but perfect diamond. "I'm asking you to marry me, to make this house a home. To fill it with your creations, your spirit, your love." Tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks as she looked at the man before her, this strong, kind man who had seen her worth when she was at her lowest. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Bradshaw, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of understanding, respect, and passion. The wedding took place in the spring, when wildflowers carpeted the valleys around Willow Creek. It was a simple ceremony in the town church, but attended by nearly everyone in the county. Josephine wore a dress she had designed herself, with panels woven from the blue fabric of her mother's church dress and trimmed with the white lace from her sister's christening gown. A bride should be draped in luxury, Meredith had sniffed when she heard of Josephine's plans. "She will be," Bradshaw had replied coolly. "She'll be wearing her heritage, her craft, and her heart. Nothing could be more luxurious." As Josephine walked down the aisle to where Bradshaw waited, radiant with joy, Mrs. Gunderson leaned toward the woman beside her. "Remember when we all thought she was strange, collecting those rags?" she whispered. "Look at her now." She turned those scraps into a life beautiful enough to capture the heart of the finest man in the territory. I heard him say once that her rags were royal to him, the woman replied. Seems he was right all along. At the altar, Bradshaw took Josephine's hands in his eyes shining with love and pride. You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen, he whispered so only she could hear. Are you certain? She teased gently. Even in my dress made of rags, especially in that dress, he replied. Every thread tells a story of who you are and where you came from. It's perfect, just like you. After the ceremony, the entire town celebrated at the Xavier Ranch, where the newly finished foreman's cabin, now transformed into the Willow Creek weaving workshop, was opened for all to see. Inside, looms were set up for the growing number of women who had joined Josephine's cooperative, and shelves displayed their creations ready for sale. Judge Holloway, who had initially been cool toward the match, approached Bradshaw during the festivities. You found yourself a remarkable woman, Xavier, he admitted grudgingly. Not what any of us expected, but remarkable nonetheless. She's beyond remarkable, Judge, Bradshaw replied. She's transformational. Look what she's created here, not just a business, but a community. And she did it starting with nothing but scraps others had thrown away. As the sun began to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and golds, Bradshaw found his bride sitting alone on the porch of the main house, watching the celebration continue in the yard below. Having second thoughts, Mrs. Xavier? He asked, sitting beside her. Not one, she assured him, leaning against his shoulder. I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year, from being mocked in the street to this. You changed it, Josephine. Your talent, your perseverance, your heart. He kissed the top of her head. I just had the good sense to recognize what I was seeing. We both recognized something in each other, she corrected him. You saw value in my rags. I saw the loneliness behind your success. Together, we've woven something neither of us could have created alone. That's poetry, Mrs. Xavier, he chuckled. It's truth, Mr. Xavier, she replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. In the years that followed, the Xavier Ranch became known not just for its cattle but for the Willow Creek weavers, whose creations were sought after throughout the West. Josephine and Bradshaw welcomed 2 children, a son who inherited his father's business acumen, and a daughter who showed her mother's artistic talent from an early age. And in their bedroom, displayed in a special frame on the wall, hung the most precious of Josephine's rags, a small square of faded calico that had once been part of her mother's apron. Beside it was a handwritten note in Bradshaw's bold script, "Royal to me always." It served as a daily reminder that true worth isn't in what something appears to be, but in what it means to those who truly see it. And that sometimes, the greatest treasures come disguised as things others are too blind to value.